Greetings. Here we are back. We are working with another rafter layout method. This time we are using the Rafter table book, and we're going to use a speed square and a tape measure. Um, this method, this method is pretty awesome. You just got to be familiar with the way the book is set up and how to read these tables that are in the back of here. But once you knew how to read these tables, setting this up is easy peasy. I mean, it's ridiculously easy. Uh, Real quick thing: when you buy a speed square, at least the 7-inch steel squares, whether it's Swanson, whether it's Johnson, everything, most of the companies are going to give you a book like this. It's a wealth of information. I talked about it in my presentation video. It goes through different uh, terms: common rafters, valley rafter, hip rafters, jack rafters. It talks about, um, for uneven pitch roofs and um, and it just sheathing requirements, and it also talks a whole lot about how to use the square, just in all aspects, how to use the square, um, and just how to read it. But in the back of this, there is these charts where basically they have done all the math for you. So if you have a 24-foot wide building that's on an 812 slope, whether you have a gable roof or a hip roof, they'll tell you exactly how long it is. And what if your building is 24 feet and 7 inches? Well, you know what? In the back of this book, there it talks about, hey, how much do you have to add if your run is not even? If your run doesn't come out to 12 feet, it comes out to 11 feet and 9 inches. This tells you add a little bit to your measurement, and boom, you're solid. So this is an excellent book. So to get started with this method, you need to know a few things. Number one, you need to know what your unit triangle is for your roof. And where you look on those plans, you look for that inverted triangle, and it will tell you, uh, you know, 12, 12, 10, 12, 3, 12, whatever it may be, how steep that roof slope is. Remember, you look on those on the elevation drawings. So you got to know that. You got to have a book or access to the internet. Um, Fun thing is they have these online now, so you can look up this book. You don't have to carry this around. But you buy, every time you get a square, you get one of these books. It's a handy thing. I keep one in my truck, uh, just in case I have to build a raft as I'm going down the highway. But it's a great place. That way, I've always got my truck. Or I've all, driving job sites in my truck, and it's there. You're gonna need square. You're gonna need tape measure. You're gonna need a something to write with. So how this works, I'm gonna come around here. I'm gonna show you what these Rafter tables look like and kind of how to read this information. Okay, here we go. This is the point where I need a little extra hand or something. Another video. If I can get you guys in. Can't really get much closer to my ladder, which is my thing here. Okay, so here's the blue. Yeah, call this the little blue book. Not like Kelly's blue book where much card. Towards the back, you can see on the page, at the top of the width of the building, you see 29 feet and 30 feet. And then there's 3 columns on each, but the far left column here is inch rise. That is your rise for one. Okay, so if I was looking at like 4 or 9 or 15, let's say it's really through, that's inch rise. That's me which row I'm going to be able to be using. And then under the 29 foot here, you can see there's 2 columns. One says com, one says hip. Com is for your common rafter. Okay. Um, so that's just your standard rafter. And if it's hip rafter, longer because it's also on two different diagonal axes. So it's going to be a longer um, rafter. There's a different measurement if you're doing a hip rafter or common. So let's just real quick here. Let's say I have a 712 roof with a 29-foot span. Then I'm going to come down here to 7, and I'm going to come over my common raft is 16 feet, 9 and 5/8 inches. That's from my plumb cut all the way down to the plumb line that goes down to my horizontal. And I'll add in my overhang measurements and everything story. I'm going to bring this over here. If my building was 34 feet wide and I had a 10-12 slope, so come down to 10-12, come all the way over 24 feet, the 22 feet, 1.5 inches. Okay, so that's how to read these tables here. Now um, it can get a little bit more complicated. As I said, if you're not an even run, your run is a little bit uneven, and you add in several inches there. But uh, in most cases, architects are going to build these things um, in 4 foot or 2 foot increments to make it easy when you're putting up OSB, because you don't want to build a 13 foot by 13 foot storage building, because then you're going to have to order extra sheets of material and you have a lot of waste. So oftentimes it's going to be there, but you get into these situations that's custom, yada yada yada. Okay, so so here we go. I have here. I have some specs. We have a 612 slope for our roof. We have a 10-foot span with a 12-inch overhang. So it's a 612 slope, 10-foot span, and a 612 overhang. Just real quick reminder that that slope is the inches of rise versus the inches of run. So for every 6 inches I go up, I go 12 inches over. Or you can say for every 12 inches you go over, you go 6 inches up. That just tells you how steep the rafter is and how steep the roof is. Um, so that's your slope. Your span is the width of the building, outside to outside. And for this, we don't even need to know the run, which is half the distance. The distance from the outside of one wall to the center of your ridge board. You don't need to know that for this method. You do need to know the span. And then our overhang, that's how much the rafter sticks out past the exterior wall. Okay, so that's the things that you need to know. Again, you got to have tape measure, the book, speed square, something to write with. Before we get started laying this out, I'm going to have some questions for you guys. You're going to write them down. So here's question number 1 is, what is slope? Okay, what's the slope of a rafter? Okay, you answer that. Let's sip a drink here. All right, I'm going to give you just another minute to write down what the slope of a rafter is. Okay, so first step, you have to determine the unit triangle and the span. So again, our unit triangle is 612, or the slope of the roof is 612. Span is 10 feet. Now I'm going to grab my handy dandy book. All right, I'm going to flip towards the back of this where all the charts are. And the neat thing about this book is it tells you the width of the building from a 3-foot wide roof, because like sometimes you'll be putting those dormers in, they're a narrow dormer, or a cricket. You're putting a cricket in. And it's probably like, what? Put a cricket? That's on the back side, on the top side of a chimney. You can't just have a vertical square block there. You're going to have to put in a little roof that helps divert water around that, so your chimney doesn't leak. It's called a cricket. So you could use these to build crickets. Anyhow, goes from 3 feet. I think it goes all the way out to 40 feet wide. Yeah, the last page here is 40 feet wide. So it's a pretty all-encompassing book. If you're doing stuff wider than 40 feet, you're probably going to have trusses or you're going to have something special uh, made up for you here. But so I'm going to flip over to width of the building. That's the first thing you're looking for here is width of the building. And I'm going to find 10 feet wide. Width of the building is span. Means the same thing. 10 feet wide. Okay, so I found my 2 columns for 10 feet. Now I'm going to go over, and that first column is my inch rise, and I have a 612. That 6 is what you want to focus on. That's your inch rise. So I'll come down here to 6-inch rise, go over to 10 feet building width. Now there's 2 columns, remember this. And you're going to have your common rafters, which are your standard on-center rafters, or you're going to have a hip rafter. This is going to be a common rafter here, so no need to do anything fancy with it. So it's that first column under COM at 6 inches. It tells me 5 feet 7 1/8 of an inch. That's going to be distance from my plumb cut at the top bridge to the outside plumb line of my bottom plate. Not my bottom plate, my bird's mouth cut. So I have that 5 foot 7 1/8. I'm just going to turn that over so I remember. Okay, now we're going to run with our speed squares. Now, in earlier classes, I had taught you how to determine angles by using the degrees, the outermost edge of your speed square. And especially in intro class, and even in carpentry 1 or construction 2, whatever you guys took at the time, because they changed my names of my classes here. I told you this center line here for your top cuts. It's got wider marked hash marks. One says common, one says hip valve. I told you guys just don't worry about those till we get to roof framing. Well, these are the ones you want to look at. So on this slot here in the middle, these are now the numbers I'm looking at. I'm not looking at the degrees on the edge of this. I'm looking right here. And there's numbers on the bottom side, there's numbers on the top side. The top side is for hip and valley rafters, which are going to have a steeper angle, just due to the fact that they're a different shape. And then you have your common rafters are on the bottom of this. So really what I'm looking for is right along this bottom edge of this thing. So not the outermost numbers, but the next set of numbers that are on the inside here. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 30. So this tells you, this will allow you to do the slope. So if I have a 612 slope, I'm just going to mark this up here. I'm going to set my pivot point on the top side of my board, top side of my rafter. Again, you want to make sure that you find your crown and it's not going down. You want crowns to rise and fall. Crowns to the sky. You always want to make sure that happens for your rafting here. Okay, pivot point holds in place, and I'm going to pivot away from the board until my 6 crosses the edge of this. And also remember, I'm not going to mark on the degree side. As you mark on the degree side, you're completely 100% totally wrong, and you're going to screw up your board. Don't do that. Mark along your ruler. Anytime you do this, unless you have a 12-12 roof, you always mark along the ruler side. The only time you ever draw an angle is if you're doing an exact 45 degree or an exact 12-12. Then you can use this side. If it's not an exact 12-12, do not draw on the degree side. Let me say that again. Don't draw on the degree side. I'm being passionate about this because students still will forget and they'll draw on the degree side. Totally wrong. If they go to cutting their raft, like, why does it work? Why is it back? They cut backwards. Why is it? I'm like, guys, come on. All right, so that's a 612 angle there. Unfortunately, this is not where I need it to begin. So I'm going to do, I almost said I was going to delete that. Now erase that. I'm going to come up near the top of my board, near the end of it. It doesn't have to be exactly on the end, but you want it to be close. Okay, so I'm going to come back in a couple inches, And then I'm going to line up my 6 out of this common thing right along the top side of my board here. Make sure my pivot point is tight, and I am going to draw a line from one end to the other. Here is my plumb cut. Plumb cut. All right, that's a 612. That's my 612 there. So now I'm gonna set the square down over here for a minute. Cap it. 5'7" and 1/8 of an inch. Yes, 5'7" and 1/8 of an inch. That is my line length. So now I'm going to take my tape measure. I'm going to stretch it out over here. Yada 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 yada. Okay. When you're doing this, lock your tape measure down here. Pull it, a good foot or so past what you actually need, and then slide it to wherever you need it to be. Okay. And then just double check before you make any marks. Double check you are on the very corner there, because if you are this way or that way, it can mess up your cuts. It can mess up your marks. So now I'm gonna come down here, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5'7" and 1/8 of an inch. Right there. Now remember, when you're looking at your tape measure, the first 12 inches, the numbers in the middle of that tape is just the numbers of inches. You go all the way down there, and you've got just the biggest numbers are inches only. But once you pass a foot, then there's smaller numbers, usually in a different color. On my tape, they're red and they're above like, so 5'7", 5 feet is 60 inches, so 67 inches. Above that, there's a little red 7, which means 5 feet 7 inches, and I can find an eighth of an inch after that. So that's a little hack when you're doing this here, because it's not going to tell you 67 and 1/8 of an inch. It's going to tell you feet and inches and fractions of an inch. Okay, so here is that's the little mark I made at, that's a terrible 5, 5'7" and 1/8 of an inch. Okay, I got that from the Rafter Tables. Now, I'm going to, again, take my square, line my pivot point up with that, get myself back on a 612, and I'm going to draw a line down the entire side of my square. Now, if you're using a smaller square, it only goes out to 7 inches. So you might have to like flip it or do some way to extend the line. But this is where these 12-inch squares come in handy. When you're cutting rafters, you can usually get across in one shot. It's awesome. Okay, so this is a plumb line for my bird's mouth. Now, what I'm going to do is I've got a couple of options for my bird's mouth here. And one of the ways that I like to do it is if I look at my 612 here, now I am going to look and figure out what degree this is. Okay, so it's 612 is like a 26 3/4 degree measurement. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to flip my square around like this, and I'm going to get the opposite of 26. As you remember, when you're doing like, you have a right angle, and it is going to be equivalent to 90 degrees, right? Okay, that little thing right there is 90 degrees. But if I come this way, and then I have I'm going to call it 27 degrees just for sake of ease. If I have 27 degrees here, then to find this angle here, I'm going to take 90 minus 27. 90 minus 27, that is going to be 3. Yeah, 63 degrees. That is my That's my reverse or opposing angle or whatever those geometry teachers call it. So if I had that, so what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna take my square and I'm gonna set it up on a 63 and a quarter angle. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to slide my square left and right until I get 3.5 inches on this plumb line here. Remember what I said in the last video? Most top plates are going to be a 2x4 wall, and you want them to be 3.5 inches. A minimum, you want 3 inches. Some people go 3 inches. I like 3.5. This brings you a little bit more space we can nail to. It works out well. So let's see here, 63 and a quarter. Slide it over till my 3.5 inch mark lines up, and then I hit the top side of my thing. I'm going to put an X in the actual bird's mouth so I know what to cut out. So down over here is my bird's mouth. Okay. And then remember, we don't cut this plumb line here. This is just so we can find our bearings and make it work right. And you, again, this thing here is, you want it to be pretty close to 3.5 inches. You want this horizontal part of your bird's mouth or your seat cut to be 3.5 inches. Okay, so I've got my plumb cut, I've got my bird's mouth. Now I just need that 12-inch overhang. So there's a couple ways to do this. And this is actually where having a framing square can come in handy. But usually what I do is I take my tape measure. We have a 12-inch overhang. So I'm going to hold it down near the bottom of this. And I'm going to eyeball this being square or not. It's pretty easy to see if I held this right here and measured over 12 inches, you can see, hey, that's not 90 degrees from your plumb line. You want to make sure it's 90 degrees from your plumb line. It's also another reason why you want to hold near the bottom of your cut. So there is, I'm pretty close to 90. If you're a little bit off, I mean, if you're at 89 degrees, 87 degrees, you're not perfectly at a right angle, it's going to be okay. Because it's going to be okay. Because usually what's going to happen is you can see, let me finish this up here. I'll talk about writing stuff loud in a minute. So now we got that mark, and so I'm going to set myself up one more 612. I'm going to slide it until I hit that mark, and I'm going to do my tail cut. 12 inches on the 90 degrees, like that. Okay. And again, this right here, I have just, through experience, I've stopped cutting my tails beforehand unless you have some kind of situation where you can't reach out there and cut them again. Because usually when you do this, it's pretty it's not going to be 100% perfect all the way down the line. You're going to have to adjust these boards a little bit. So if you cut all these perfect and take all the time to cut all these, chances are you're going to have to cut them again anyhow. So leave them running along, but you know, okay, that's where the tail cut would be. Okay. Last thing you want to do before you actually cut this, again, this plumb cut is to the center of the ridge board, and what you want to do is bring it in 3/4 of an inch. So 3/4. Again, you're going to measure over square. Set up another 612. Okay, so our first plumb cut was just for theory. Our second line, this is the actual So cut this line, we cut the bird's mouth, we cut the tail cut, and you have a rafter that's ready to go. Now, so looking at this here, real quick review. If this was my top plate wall, it would sit something about like this on here. That bird's mouth cut coming in 3.5 inches would seat down there. That would give me a couple places I could toenail on each side and really attach to the top plate. My tail cut would get cut off there, my plumb cut, and this would be about what it looks like here. You can see that if I wasn't talking about this, if I was just looking at the video, or if I was just looking up information, measuring, marking, I could do this in a minute and a half. It's a very quick method. You don't have to sit there and try to line up your squares all the way down, or you don't want Pythagorean, like, okay, all right, well, I know a squared plus b squared equals c squared, do this, find square root of this, and then multiply it by the number of runs, and then that gives you your line length. They did all that stuff in this book. So you can just find the right, read the table the right way. You can get your line length, mark it, and you're all set. It's like I said, if I'm building roofs, that's what I'm doing. So, hey, other question for you. How deep is your average bird's mouth cut? How deep is your average bird's mouth cut? I gave you a specific figure, like what's the horizontal depth of your average bird's mouth cut? Okay, so we've got all this. All right, next video I'm going to have for you, I'm going to do this on a 2x6, and I'll actually go through the cutting process. So I'll do a faster version of this, just a refresher version of this, and then I'll show you how to cut it, because the bird's mouth cuts can get kind of tricky. But we'll talk about that, and also talk about making your pattern and going from there. And then what I'm actually going to do is start putting some of these things together on the roof system out there. Okay, guys, that is it for me this evening. And I really hope you guys are staying current with your assignments, watching these videos, learning some things, because you really can. You can learn, and you can, like, okay, so if you get on a job site and you guys are building rafters, like, all right, here it is. Yeah, all that stuff Mr. Wall was talking about. Yeah, I kind of remember that. Yeah, you've got one of those books? Okay. Or you've got the app for the Rafter Tables? All right, great. Yeah, I can do this. And it's going to make you valuable to an employer. If you coming out of high school, if you can lay out a rafter and cut a rafter, and put it in, they will be impressed. And then all you got to do is show up on time and every day, and then you have it made, man. You got it made. Okay. All right, guys. The semester's drawing close to an end. At least in 2020 here. So I'm going to try to start moving a little bit quicker with some of the stuff, so I can get through roof framing. I'd love to get through some roof finishing, like doing roofing materials, and I'd love to do some stair building. Stair building is very similar to the step down method that we went over there. It's just you cut out all those notches instead of just drawing them. All right, I'm gonna let you guys go. Have a good night. See you in the next thing.